Stardate 1380.9. Alright, let me just get this put away and my gloves on. Okay, so, ton of stuff has happened since the last podcast. Journal entry, but hopefully this won't be too long. I'll try to keep it to like 15 or 20 minutes. So, last time, I was down in Bishop, which is a town about a third of the way through the high Sierras. And I'd encountered quite a lot of snow and resistance in the Sierras, and I'd lost my hiking partners in a blizzard. So I was at a hostel trying to figure out what to do. So a couple guys that I'd been hiking with actually very early on in the trail, one named Andre, his trail name is 8 Ball, and another named Corey, and his trail name is Dunks. They also were in a similar situation, and for a little while we were talking about going to San Francisco, but what eventually happened was we rented a van from Enterprise and packed in a total of 11 hikers, including myself, and we drove north 700 miles to Castella, California, which is sort of close to the California-Oregon border. And the idea there was to try to get away from the snow, because the snow was really the thing that was super dangerous and unpredictable. And there was a new sort of like pattern of weather coming into the Sierras, and it looked like it was just going to continue to snow for a while. So the plan is, the plan was to go up to Castella and then hike south. And it would probably take us about a month to hike back to the Sierras. And in that amount of time, the sun, sort of like the June sun, will have melted most of the snow that was making things so treacherous. So that's what we did, and I was the driver, and it was super fun. We had a bunch of people with a whole lot of different priorities. So we first went to the supermarket, and then we went to post offices in 2 different towns to round up everyone's packages that were in the wrong places. And then we settled into about a 6 or 7 hour drive through pouring rain. But we drove through some absolutely gorgeous country in California. We drove by the most alkaline lake in the world, and just these like really nice mountain ranges. I think there's actually a range here called the White Mountains, sort of like New Hampshire. And my co-pilot was some kind of like crazy particle physicist hiker, and so she was trying to teach me how to do matrix math with like 7 sets of matrices stacked on top of each other to keep me awake. And yeah, everything just went super smooth. We got in about 8 o'clock. The hostel we were going to stay at didn't look very good, so we rented 2 rooms at a cheap motel for total of $200, and split 11 ways. That was super cheap. So the total cost, I think, per person of doing this was about $60. And that was like splitting the van cost and the gasoline and the hotel. So pretty good deal. So the next day, we basically just kind of head off. I returned the van to a town called Redding and caught an Uber back, which people reimbursed me for, and we got on the trail. And what a difference! It was just completely different trail. Obviously no snow, beautiful day, soft, sort of dirt to walk on instead of just rocks and sand. And these very tall, thin pine trees everywhere, a sense of quiet. So it was really like just super nice. Um, so we went about 22 miles that day, and I ended up camping again with Dunks and 8 Ball. Um, and these two guys, really early on in my audio journals, I was talking about 3 hikers, um, younger hikers, and one of them, Jeremy, had to go off trail because he injured his Achilles, and he was sort of the leader of the pack of this group. And the other 2 of which were Dunks and 8 Ball. So that's kind of how I knew them from early on in the desert. So it's kind of turned into me and those guys and this other hiker named Prince from England, who's a monarchist. And yeah, we've just been kind of camping every night together in the same spots and just kind of generally working out. But a couple things have gone very wrong for me in the past week or so since we left Castella. One was I had a really bad blister from the desert that turned into a callus and was, problem solved, right? Callus. But when I was in the high Sierras, our feet were wet so often that the callus kind of rotted and fell off, or part of it fell off, exposing very tender skin underneath. So now that we're back in desert-like environment for part of the day, it can get up to like 85 or 90. That's becoming a blister again. And I started walking away from the blister, sort of rolling my foot a little bit to the side so I wouldn't step on it. And I knew I shouldn't do that because it's caused problems before. But, it's painful. And when you're trying to do 30-mile days, you kind of make some compromises. But the result of that was a knee injury. So I have a pretty bad left knee problem now. It's like a deep soreness on the outside of my left knee that comes and goes during the day. I'm just starting to try Advil to reduce the swelling, and it seemed to work yesterday, not so much this morning. So I don't really know what the future holds for me in the next week or two. If I'm going to have to pull off the trail and rest for a while or get a brace. I really don't want to get a brace. Braces aren't usually bad news. They cause problems too. And I'm going to try to start taking glucosamine again. I stopped taking glucosamine at the very beginning of this trip because I didn't want to carry the extra weight. And I think that was a big mistake. So I'm going to take glucosamine and get some sort of turmeric anti-inflammatory that my mom recommended. Thanks, Mom. And see how things go. But yeah, it's too bad. We're walking through this sort of volcanic valley. It's quite beautiful. There's volcanoes like everywhere you look. And we've got Mount Shasta. We've been walking slowly by and away from Mount Shasta, which is the second largest mountain in the continental U.S. Really, really very striking. It's also a volcano. It's got that sort of gentle slope up to the peak that lasts several miles. Yeah, but the volcanic rock isn't making it much easier to walk on the trail. It's sort of scattered everywhere, and it's very sharp. And it's easy to sort of step on it and start rolling along like you're on some sort of sharp ball bearings. Yeah, so just a little discouraging. Beautiful place, great hiking for the most part, but just in pain all day for the past maybe 4 or 5 days. The next stop is actually today, this morning, we're stopping in a place called Old Town. And we're going to go to a restaurant called JJ's for brunch and then lunch. And there's caves there called the Subway Caves that we can explore for a bit. So a nice detour. And then tomorrow we are walking through a part of the park that requires bear canisters, and none of us have a bear canister. We ditched them when we left the Sierra, so we have to walk. I think it's only about 22 miles through that section to kind of like get to the part of the trail where we can camp, because we're not allowed to camp unless we have bear canisters. And after that, it's on to a town called what is it called? Chester. And Chester has a movie theater, so I'm very much looking forward to the movie theater in Chester. Hopefully they're playing Solo, even though I heard that the reviews weren't that great. And that's pretty much about it. Quick update on Wishy and Padre. They made it to VVR successfully and have continued on. I saw on their blog they passed mile 900, and I think we also have passed mile 900 a while back. The mileage is all kind of messed up now for us because, you know, it says we're around mile 14 something or 13 something, but really we've only hiked between 900 and 1,000 miles. So I'll try to do some math next time and figure out when I cross the 1,000 mile mark, because that will be a nice benchmark to note and celebrate. And so, yeah, so Wishy and Padre are doing great. I think they're struggling with the weather still quite a lot, and you know, sort of suffering. It's very cold and wet, and they've lost feeling in their hands and feet, and like I've still lost feeling in my toes. Most of the people that were in the van that I drove up with when we started talking about it said they also had no feeling in their toes. So we're all dealing with some sort of altitude nerve damage. But yeah, Wishy and Padre, they're tough. They're tough people, and they were awesome to hike with. Super fun to hike with. So I hope I can connect with them again at some point, maybe in Oregon. And then update on Timber and Coins, who are also lost, to me anyway, in the Sierras for a good 10 days. They've also made it to where they were going. They were going to Mammoth, and I think it took them, you know, 3 or 4 days longer than they intended. And they seem still very determined. You know, so they say the post-holing is terrible and it's extremely slow going. But no, you know, nothing went terribly wrong, I guess. So that's awesome that they're continuing. For me, I'm really, really happy to be out of the Sierras, and this is kind of the hike I wanted from the beginning. I'd planned to get to the Sierras, and then I think the original plan was to go up to Oregon or Washington and then walk south. But now that I know that there's a ton of snow in Washington, that never would have been practical. But yeah, the original plan was just to go north somewhere and then hike down to the Sierras when they were in their sort of most beautiful state. So this is my back to plan A hike now, since I'd been encouraged by people to try to go through the Sierras when there was lots of snow there. And so complete the hike in sort of one straight direction. But this is much more my style. So if my knee will just clear up, I think things will be perfect. I just need my knee to clear up. So cross your fingers for me, and that's it for me. Rave out.